My guy pretty like a girl, and he's got 5 stories to tell. I see both sides like Chanel. What up, nerds? Alright, dude. Here we go. Trauma, transphobia, and the internet. Why I left for 2.5 years. Alrighty, let's do it. Ash Hardell. Let's get this going, bro. Alright, content warning. Transphobia, homophobia, fatphobia, transmedicalism, mental health issues, mention of suicide, anti-LGBTQ slurs, ableism, ableist slurs, harassment, discussions of abuse, violence, and discussion of grooming and sexual predatorization. Sounds like your typical Discord call with the boys while playing Call of Duty. Sounds like this is going to be a fun video. Let's get this going. This call. All right, shut up. Is it muted? Okay. All right, it's a lot of buttons. All right.
Come with me, and you'll be in a world of pure imagination. Take a look, and you'll see into your imagination.
How the fuck do you sleep with all those clocks going on? How do you sleep with all? I would be pissed. I'd kill my wife.
We'll begin with a spin, traveling in a world of my creation. What we'll see will defy explanation.
Is this like their intro?
If you want to view paradise.
Ash Hardell is healing. That's the character they're playing here.
Simply look around.
We have Blair White as internalized transphobia. Okay.
And view it. Anything.
We have Zach as dope vocals. Okay. Can't wait to hear those. I'm excited to hear dope vocals.
You want to do it.
And then everyone in the description is valuable assistants. How many people are in the description? Wow, that's a lot of people. Wow, incredible. Okay.
Wanna change.
All right. Hold on. I gotta somehow minimize this. Jesus, I'm fucking boring. I mean, old. Oh, I'm boring too, but seriously, thanks everyone for the help. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. All right, let's get this moving. I'm excited for the start of the movie. You remember? You want to know what? Okay, we've decided that credits go at the end of the fucking movie for a reason. Okay, you're boring me. Just fucking with you. I can't wait to watch this on Netflix. It's gonna be exciting.
Get it?
No.
Pure imagination. It's a Trender reference.
I don't understand.
I'm owning it now. It feels weird to be back. I vote.
I like the Teddy Fresh shirt she's wearing though. Nice color block palette. Looks good. Looks good. They? Wait, hold on. Okay, hold on. I'm not even memeing. Wait, what's the pronouns of this person? I'm not. They. Okay, sorry. I genuinely mean it. I didn't even think about it. Do they have pronouns listed somewhere? Instagram? Fuck. Anywhere? YouTube bio. Am I dumb? I'm queer. That's not a pronoun. I don't see a pronoun. Okay, I'm just gonna say they. Sorry.
Make this an adult coffee.
Okay.
Nice and cold because it took me a billion years to set up the camera.
I'm not reading this whole thing for the pronouns. They should have just said it somewhere accessible. I'm gonna just say they.
Forgot how to do this. Okay, let's just start. Hey everyone, how's it going? How you doing? I'm doing weird. A lot has changed. I left YouTube for 1.5 years, almost 2 years.
Ha! Just kidding. Editing Ash here. I was definitely gone for over 2 years, so sorry about that. I underestimated how long this big and emotional bad boy would take me to finish while I was also wrapping up grad school, so I have bad time management.
Want to go out to dinner tonight? I want to go out to dinner. Yeah, after this video, we'll talk about it more. Okay, yeah.
Management skills, and I'm slow. Oops.
A lot has changed. I left YouTube for
basically 700 internet years.
I confronted some unresolved trauma, and I got a TikTok. Can you tell? I'm so sparkly now.
TikTok is terrible. TikTok is horrible. How come you didn't post your likes on it? Whatever.
No! Oh, don't worry, not to post or anything. I'm 29. I think that's against the rules. I just lurk in the shadows and feel empowered watching the GNC folks unapologetically be themselves. They're why I felt brave and glued flowers on my face today. So, the trendercore aesthetic of this project is dedicated to them, and the hours-long analysis challenging various forms of online transphobia is dedicated to me, as well as anyone else who finds it therapeutic.
There is no life I know to compare with pure imagination. Living there, you'll be free if you truly wish to be.
The coffee was nice, but let's crack open a beer. It's much more on brand. This beer is called Tropical Fun Pants, and yes, I bedazzled the can. If you don't
Is this like an advertisement? What's
know
happening?
who I am, my name is Ash, and I've been posting videos on YouTube since 2011. I am old. A few years into making content, and I came out as queer, and then later as trans. Eventually, I chose to medically transition with top surgery, which I documented on my channel. At that point, I was in a unique position, because thanks to 1, how long I'd been on the platform, and 2, because of a brush I had with virality, I ended up being one of the largest non-binary voices on
What was that video called?
I'd been on the platform, and 2, because of a brush I had
Calling my mom, tell her I'm trans. Okay.
with virality, I ended up being one of the largest non-binary voices on this site. Now, I have no idea if that's the case anymore, seeing as I bravely ran away. But as far as YouTube goes, I was a peek into what happens when an indie creator breaks out of their predominantly LGBT+ progressive audience and is exposed to a more general population.
Okay.
Ashley Hardell.
Ash Hardell.
Fucking hell, Ashley, you are such a pussy.
Don't use the word
Oh, Jesus Christ. What did I miss? Holy shit. This seems insane.
transgender here.
It's so weird how narcissistic they are. They think that they're so special.
Why else would you put on this big fucking show if not to get attention?
It's like refuting a goddamn child, I swear.
Stupidity.
A motherload of crazy.
Fucking pathetic. Fucking
What did they do to warrant this behavior or warrant these responses? Specifically from this other person that looks
Goddamn child, I swear.
this person, they look LGBTQ-ish. I don't know, maybe they have a more valid reason, but
A motherload of crazy.
fucking pathetic. Fucking big.
Spoiler. It bad. Now, if you've been keeping up with the discourse, you know that I am not the only non-binary person who's endured targeted harassment on YouTube.
okay.
Hi all, it's Milo. It is frustrating and deeply sad.
This person seems like they're fucking crazy. I don't remember the specifics, but I remember looking at them and going, maybe that was in my more, I don't know, maybe I was just wrong about them. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe it's unwarranted. Maybe we just have to take a minute and reflect and go like, just because you think someone might be weird doesn't mean that you're right about them being wrong. You know what I mean? And that's not an insult. I look weird too. But I'm traditional weird. You know, I'm like Southern hick weird. It's like, oh, look at that guy. He probably fucks his sister and has no teeth. You'd be surprised because I actually do have teeth. But yeah, okay. Let's just move on from that joke.
That my experiences of facing an online harassment campaign around 2016 are still relevant to conversations taking place on this platform.
I've been afraid to put
I guess we did have like the, what was it called? Gamergate or something? Ugh, like we would just kind of nay on social justice warriors all the time. It's a pretty cool time, guys. That's when I felt the most alive as a straight white cisgender male. Now I feel like I have to be sensitive to people. It's fucking crazy. Are you kidding me? I have to have basic levels of respect for people that I think are weird. This is stupid. I wish we can go back to the 1920s when my parents owned slaves or something. You know what I'm saying? What a time to be alive. Am I right, guys? That's what Doja Cat wrote that song. You know? Oh, what a time to be alive. Right, that was Doja Cat. Let's
post about myself online because Calvin Guerra and his fan base bullied me off the internet.
After Calvin made that video, a bunch of his people came to me.
He sent thousands and thousands of his followers and stands and whatever onto my channel, which was a lot smaller than
Calvin
his.
who?
Small trans creators have remained the targets of reaction videos that target trans people for their appearance and identities under the ruse of making a political argument.
They said that I was too fat for top surgery. It looked like I still had boobs. I shouldn't have had surgery because I was stealing that opportunity from someone who really needed it.
They told me to commit suicide.
The result was
Jesus
that I no longer
Christ.
felt very safe or comfortable talking about my transition on this platform.
Possibly the longest lasting effect of the harassment was the fact that I developed a lot of paranoia and hypervigilance. I became extremely afraid that someone would try to hurt me in person.
Someone once messaged me to warn me that someone else was plotting on their Tumblr to come and find me on my campus and hurt me.
That's fucked up. Also, though, they ruined Tumblr when they got rid of porn, and you know it's true.
This has affected me for years.
And this was ages ago now, but it's still something that it does genuinely sting.
And it still affects me. I'm still bouncing my leg.
What is it? Galvin, let me see. Papa, if you don't know, Calvin Gara, it's not a bad for me. Okay, I'll look into it.
To be talking about Calvin Guerra.
That was trauma, and that trauma lingers even now.
Watching my friends take a stand against the digital abuse that they and other trans people endured was healing, and it's empowered me to share my experience. Personally, I think my story is worth hearing because it demonstrates just how far—
Someone's gonna have to show me something like that's a good resource to look at Calvin Gara on.
Reaching and diverse hatred towards trans people can be online. You see, the mistreatment of trans folks extends well beyond any single influencer or genre of content. AKA, it's not just Calvin Gara and non-binary cringe videos.
Like maybe like a June the King or a Jay Auberry video or a Right Opinion video or something like that would be good. Or an Internet of Jay.
Ye old anti-SJW YouTube might be over, but the persecution of trans folks online is—
Wait, that's interesting. All right, trans guy reacts to the worst of Ash Hardell. Okay, there are only 2 genders. Okay, all right.
Is not. In fact, nowadays, I think we are actually up against a much bigger and scarier kind of monster. And I'm speaking up because I'm a little worried that folks don't truly understand that. And I want to make sure that we don't fall into complacency. Our work is not done. There is still so much insidious bigotry out there that needs to be challenged. Now, I won't lie. Sitting here and opening up about what I went through feels pretty vulnerable. I hate when YouTubers get dramatic. Now I won't lie. But for real. Now I won't— such a cheesy fucking line. Now, but it's real. But I hate saying it. Now, I won't lie. Sitting here and opening up about what I went through, I feel pretty vulnerable and fragile. Making this video will force me to relive the time when an international newspaper called me a child.
I've seen girls who change gender, groom younger ones to do the same, and in nearly every case they are autistic. Jesus Christ. What the fuck? Holy shit, that's insane. That's fucking insane, bro. You have to send the video in like my Instagram or something. Or channel points. But that's insane. I've seen girls who changed gender groom younger ones to do the same, and in nearly every case they are autistic. So listen, that's a spicy take. Let's remove the autistic thing from it, because them saying that is making me autistic. I'm just kidding. So listen, I think that younger people, young girls tend to lean more towards like, not, or we'll say biological girl. Like, I don't want to be invalidating, but it tends to seem, it seems to be more girls that are experimenting with their gender than guys, generally speaking. Biological girls, guys. I'm not saying that to be invalidating. It just seems like that's the trend, and that probably gets into a deep conversation about instilling homophobic ideologies into men while not doing so much to women, right? That's a whole conversation for another day. But to me, this reads as like, oh, there was a girl who identified as non-binary, and then they talked to other girls, and then those girls realized they also want to experiment with their gender. And at the end of the day, for me, it's like, let kids be kids. If kids want to experiment with their gender socially, let them. Like, who gives a shit? Like, like, if your kid's like, oh, I want to, like, if you have a girl and she's like, I'm non-binary, I want to dress like this, who cares? It's a fucking kid. Kids experiment with this shit all the time, okay? People do that stuff all the time. Let kids experiment with their gender. It's not going to hurt them. They probably will, lack of a better term, grow out of it. Maybe some of them do have gender dysphoria, but some of them are just experimenting with the concept of a different gender. Who gives a shit? It really does not matter. It just doesn't. But experimenting is gay papa, who cares? True, you're right. I take everything back.
Groomer. When a broadcasting network characterized my book as a tool for abuse and indoctrination. When a YouTube mom publicly questioned my fitness as a future parent.
And now she's...
What's the book? Why'd you censor this person's face?
He's telling their wife that I want kids. Cute gays making babies. I see what you're doing, Ash, going back to this. Oh, look, I'm becoming a mommy vlogger thing. Holy shit, you are gonna get so traumatized when you have a kid.
When one creator was so dedicated to my downfall that he made 18 videos and nearly 6 hours of content about me.
Wow. Hey, looks like you're that person's cash cow.
Popular trans YouTuber leaked my private day job to nearly 500,000 people and platformed some really harmful takes about me. And when that same YouTuber approached me years later, informing me that his views had changed and asking for a chance to apologize. And finally, when all my worst fears and insecurities turned themselves into a book.
Irreversible damage. The transgender craze seducing our daughters. Oh no.
A book which mentions me by name and which at one point you could just walk into Target or Barnes & Noble and buy. Nothing like the mass distribution of a person's trauma, am I right? I need people to know that the stakes for not challenging some of these violent acts are high. We'll dive deeper into this later, but due to the transphobic backlash that I received, I ended up developing legitimate pathology. This included PTSD symptoms and—
What is pathology? Oh, I guess like a mental illness. Okay.
And a tic disorder. But worst of all, for a time, I was gaslit into viewing myself as something dangerous. Anti-SJWs, conservative media, trans medicalists, and trans-exclusionary radical feminists were all hurling vile accusations my way. Accusations which I eventually started to entertain.
Why do people keep saying that you're cashing in on being trans? That's the one that I don't understand. I can write a lot of this off as like just attacking trans people for existing. I just don't understand the cashing in on being trans. Do people... Was there something going on that like they made them seem like a trans trender or something?
And later internalize.
Couldn't get famous being cis? Yeah, I don't understand. Like, why is there that claim? What's going on there?
The worst of these voices called me a predator. They said that my actions were calculated, sinister, and that my goal was to convert young people into becoming trans for my own social and monetary gain. The more...
Why? Trans people don't have any money, you know what I'm saying? Why? Hey, I'm gonna convert you to be trans for money. Trans people have no money. They can't even get fucking jobs because nobody wants to hire them. If I wouldn't do that. I would convert you into being cis so you can get a real fucking job and you can give me money. Okay, that's my ploy. I'm gonna convert all you trans people into cisgender people so that you're no longer oppressed and you can get a job. You won't be excluded from the workforce, and then you can give me all your hard-earned dollars. Huh? What do you think? That makes a lot more sense, money-wise, does it not? Hey, I figured it out.
Charitable critics slightly disagreed. They claimed that I myself had been brainwashed into the trans cult.
This is the kind of crap that enables people like Ash to think that they're a special snowflake gender. She's wasting her adorable face by plastering it on the front of this...
non-binary, or they, sorry, excuse me. Non-binary, I wouldn't say that's a special snow. I mean, who cares about like an additional categorization for like people who don't necessarily conform to the binary? Who gives a shit? As long as we don't start thinking it's valid to be a fucking deer gender, I don't care. Like, keep it to boy, girl, neither, both in some capacity, something in that makes sense as the classification of gender, but you're not a fucking deer gender. That's where I draw the line.
Social justice bullshit instead of doing something that's actually worthwhile, like, you know, letting me fuck the shit out of her.
Or maybe my transness was rooted in a fetish or a desire.
Wow, that was really weird. That was uncomfortable. Okay.
To be young forever.
Ash seems to have this weird obsession with being childlike. It's definitely Peter Pan syndrome.
Some people have accused Ash of having like a
Peter Pan syndrome. What the fuck?
Peter Pan syndrome and wanting to remain a child.
Oh, wanting to be a child forever. Okay.
More than they want to be non-binary.
These voices asserted that while my efforts might not be malicious or even within my own conscious awareness, the effect was still the same. I was confusing and harming thousands of people who watched my videos. I was convincing cis people that they were trans and ruining lives. Because I heard these claims so repetitively and delivered with such conviction, for a while I started to view myself and my transness as disingenuous and potentially dangerous. I lost a grip on how to...
That's fucked up, dude. I'm laughing, but that's fucked up. Imagine somebody gaslit you into thinking that you just weren't like a real valid person. That's fucking horrible. Holy shit. That's really fucked up, dude. That's terrible.
Evaluate reality and my own sanity. I no longer had a working internal barometer for what I thought was true anymore. Arthur, that was right after the sad part. Wow, you just killed a moment. I'm talking about how I was so gaslit and you're all like, meow. Anyway, admitting that I internalized these false claims even for just a moment feels embarrassing. Even now, lingering influences from these messages still exist in my life, and I'm still working through a lot of the shame around how affected I was by some of these ideas. So, this lengthy exposition is all just to establish that my trauma response is still very much alive and kicking. While I feel super empowered by the recent shift in tone surrounding trans discourse, that empowerment is simultaneously cautious and delicate. I'm worried that by opening
Hey, why didn't you show me, bro? I'm trans. I'm a trans, you know what I'm saying?
Up and sharing my story and confessing to some of my personal self-doubts and struggles in the process, folks may try to weaponize those disclosures against me later. And while this is an uncomfortable reality, I still feel compelled to use my voice. You see, I now recognize that the egregious statements made about me were unsubstantiated.
Yeah, I'm trans sexy. What are you trying to say by that? I'm trans. I'm just identifying as sexy, bro. I'm not trans sexy. I am. Well, is that now that I said that it's invalidating to trans people? I don't know.
Made in bad faith and ultimately rooted in transphobia. They were plainly and patently wrong. With that understanding, it's time for me to move on. However, I don't think I can do that without making this series. I need to share why I know these accusations are wrong. I also need the closure that comes with having control over my own narrative. After all, as a wise YouTuber once said, because I was hurt so publicly, I need to heal publicly. Okay. So, what are we gonna do in this?
Who is that, Albert Einstein?
Project. What can you expect? Well, in the first few parts, I know parts, I am such an annoying YouTuber. I tried to fit everything in one video, fam, but the script is literally like 80 pages long. For self-care purposes, you're getting parts. In the first few parts, we'll explore several themes. These themes will examine nuances, which make harassment in a digital environment a complex and distinct experience, especially for trans people. This video specifically will look at radicalization and anonymity. I'll act as a case example and share some personal stories. Additionally, throughout the series, we'll spend some time debunking some of the most commonly made arguments that transphobes employ when trying to discredit and vilify trans people. Then, in the very last part part, we will look at everything through a trauma-informed lens, because I am a psych nerd. A psych master student. Just a student, though. Just a student, not an expert. In that section, I'll break down exactly...
Psych master student? What does that mean, that you're going to school? You don't have your master's? Oh, they graduated. I was just confused by what a psych master's student... Okay.
Why and how an experience like mine or Brennan's or Milo's...
You're making me like, say the right information. I gotta read. I'm fucking old. I don't want to sit here and have to read. Jesus Christ. Do all the work for me. Say it out loud. I want to close my eyes.
Can be legitimately traumatizing. And I mean like rewire your nervous system and literally change your physiology traumatizing. Sounds fun, right? Let's go! Theme 1, radicalization.
Okay.
It's no secret that the internet has proven to be a valuable tool for...
Are we gonna get an outfit change every single time we go into a new chapter? Is that gonna be the theme here? Yes, it looks... Oh, no, it's not. Well, that's unfortunate. You should have done... Oh, kind of. Well, we'll keep going.
Members of extreme ideologies to share their views, connect with one another, and insulate inside echo chambers. As a result...
Bro, 4chan's really only good for porn now. I saw it in the thing. Let's be honest, bro. You just go out there for fucking porn. That's it.
Certain groups and individuals have become radicalized through social media.
You're about to meet a man who says he was radicalized by alt-right figures via their persuasive YouTube videos.
It is true, man. That's like a real thing. Isn't it crazy? So people will... So this is what we talk about, the alt-right pipeline, but it actually can go multiple ways, right? It really can, which to an extent, you know... Okay, so here's what happens, right? Is like the alt-right pipeline is the idea that you start liking, like, maybe you're a little bit more inclined to like edgier content. You see edgy content, and then the algorithms on usually like Facebook, Instagram, whatever social media site you're seeing are going to want to feed into that idea because they want to sell you content. They want you to like content. So as they sell you things, you slowly become more radicalized in a particular direction. And so you become more and more like right-leaning, and you become like brainwashed in like right-wing ideology. The thing is that if you're going to acknowledge the alt-right pipeline, then I guess there is like an alt-left pipeline. And to a degree, and I haven't really explored this because something I just thought about, I guess you could get like roped into some kind of ideologies in a toxic capacity. And I'm not saying that like trans is an ideology that's toxic, but I mean, if we're going to make the argument that social media can have an impact on making you more right-wing, then the same goes for left-wing as well. You would generally say, though, that like left-wing ideologies aren't as toxic, but you know, well, they're not as toxic. I mean, right-wing ideology is generally associated with like oppression and regressive, you know, but I guess it could go both ways. And that's probably the argument that people are going to make. They're going to be like, well, you know, people are watching your content. Maybe they started by being like a bit curious about their sexuality, and then they watched your content and it radicalized them in some capacity and blah, blah, blah. I would just say that at the end of the day, as long as these individuals are happy and they're not hurting other people, it really doesn't matter. And that's where the alt-right would be negative, because you're usually hurting people, because you're promoting, you usually will go into an area of like promoting racist or homophobic or transphobic ideologies. So sure, yeah.
Many folks believe that the YouTube algorithm specifically...
But then, like, of course, conservatives will be like, well, you're feminizing men or something. Like, that's usually what the whole thing is. Like, you're gaslighting children into thinking that blah, 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 blah. Okay.
Has a strong...
I think the harm comes in, I guess, from like a trans perspective. I think the harm when it comes for the way that trans or people interact with trans people for kids is not letting their kids explore their gender. Because you do hear some like stories where it's not like you have like a 4-year-old kid that's like, oh, I'm a girl, I'm actually a girl, not a boy. It's that once they say that, people feed into it really heavily in a way to try to probably be a good parent. But like, there's nothing, if your 4-year-old says, I'm a girl, and let's say they're like a biological boy, okay, I don't care. Like, you just don't acknowledge it. And then if that is a continuous behavior as time goes on, that's giving them a lot of mental stress, then of course you could address it in some capacity, going to a therapist, possible like social transitioning, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, but we went on tangent.
Radicalizing influence, as it has a history of pushing users towards extreme and provocative content. This algorithm is what exposes non-binary creators to audiences that would not normally seek out their videos. This often includes enthusiastic transphobes, anti-SJWs, passionate trans medicalists, religious fundamentalists, TERFs, and more. All groups that most NB individuals would be far less likely to have confrontations with IRL. And of course, same goes for any marginalized people. If you belong to an oppressed group and you make videos about that oppression or about...
Well, nobody's going to have like conversations with people in real life for the most part. Like, you know, you usually just keep to yourself.
Your identity, your oppressors almost certainly will find you in significant numbers. I recall noticing this phenomenon early in my YouTube presence. After I came out, I would vent to my real life friends about the hurtful comments I'd get from the internet. And they'd ask, Ash, why do you think you get so much...
Let's see. Hold on.
Vent to my real life friends about the hurtful comments I'd get from the internet.
Too ugly to watch. That's fucking mean. Okay.
And they'd ask, Ash, why do you think you get so much hate? And I'd say, well, think about it. Who's often captivated by trans videos? The two groups most interested tend to be trans people and transphobes.
Hey, I guess you're making that money then, huh? Yeah, hey, half my audience is transphobes. Hey, at least I'm making money. You know what I mean?
Anyway, it didn't take much for the algorithm to figure this out and start regularly placing me in front of hateful eyes. As time marched on, the number of prejudiced people disproportionately grew. And more interestingly, I noticed that the flavor of their prejudice became more and more intense. Their ideology was getting increasingly radical. Years later, I felt vindicated when the New York Times came out with an entire podcast exploring the ways that YouTube radicalizes people, and when other scholarly sources started publishing articles and studies on social media's radicalizing effect on users. I've compiled a list of links to videos, articles, and primary sources that discuss this. I strongly encourage you to not just take my word for it, but look into it yourself. Not everyone's convinced that the algorithm has a radicalizing influence, and while
it does. We have never explored the idea of like left-leaning radicalization. I feel like it's too much. We don't really take it as seriously. That's a conversation to have, I think.
Everything I've read that dissents seems to get quickly and thoroughly debunked, I should still admit my bias. Like I said, I really believe I have felt the effects of audience radicalization firsthand on my own channel. I've also witnessed the same thing happen to many of my trans friends, and I think
here's what I know. Jon Stewart said it exists. I don't care. That's all it takes for me. I love Jon Stewart. He's a fucking incredible man. He's probably like the only person that I'd ever hear something from and like just take it at face value. But like I've also heard of this idea before that, so it's not just Jon Stewart, but he's an incredibly intelligent person.
More than enough compelling evidence to support this theory. Still, lots of links below. Decide for yourself. Now, while I don't have time to go over the nuances of exactly how algorithms radicalize folks, it's kind of complicated. It's incredibly complicated. I do want to take a moment to try and
smash or pass Jon Stewart smash.
Briefly, like really briefly, super brief. Summarize some of the history and mechanics behind YouTube's algorithm as I understand it. According to Guillaume Chalot, I had one of Grayson's French coworkers pronounce that name for me, so hopefully I don't totally mess it up. I'm sure I messed it up a little though. According to Guillaume Chalot, a PhD in artificial intelligence and a former Google engineer, since the inception of the platform, the idea was to maximize time spent on YouTube at all costs. To make it grow,
this guy had to get a PhD in fake intelligence? What a loser. Like, dude, what? Get a PhD in real intelligence, idiot. What a dumbass, bro. These people were fucking making up PhDs now. I have a PhD in fake intelligence. You're a moron. You're a fucking idiot. These people, dude. Like, go figure. You know what I'm saying? Like,
as big as possible. Hurrah, capitalism. Chalot explains that the earliest versions of the algorithm.
God damn it. Why does everything have to be anti-capitalist? Why does everything have to be anti-capitalist? Like, hey, I made a product and I want people to consume it, so it's fuck capitalism. Okay. Because fundamentally, this algorithm makes sense. You want people, you want to maximize the watch time. I don't know about all costs. Like, I mean, I guess. But okay. All right. Fuck capitalism. Let's
algorithm attempted to achieve this by prioritizing clicks. But then clickbait became a problem. Next, the algorithm prioritized watch time, recommending videos similar to those that folks were already spending most of their time on. However, eventually people grew tired of being recommended the same content over and over and over and over. So Google decided to revamp the algorithm once more, but this time they set out to help users actually expand their taste using something called deep neural networks. So sciencey. By collecting millions of data points, they were able to create connections to the same kinds of videos that people were already watching, but now often with more extreme viewpoints. The same topics, but inflammatory, provocative, reactionary, radical. And this worked. In 2016, YouTube surpassed 1 billion hours of watch time per day. Wow. Users were effectively getting transfixed by the increasingly extreme content.
Transfixed?
That the site was putting in front of them. YouTube had finally found its way to grow as big as possible at all costs. After this, every time users consumed a recommended video, they traveled further and further down the rabbit hole of niche and reactionary content. In just a few clicks, someone vulnerable to conspiracy could go from 2016 election results to Hillary linked to sex trafficking to QAnon explained. Yikes. Or tips for building confidence to how to pick up girls to the life of an incel. And then they're on a forum and all hope is lost. You know, speaking of QAnon, quick sidebar. I recently found out that HBO released a docu-series on the Q community. Q community? That's hard to say. It should just be Q-munity. The Q-munity.
No,
is that a thing? Documentary. Docu-series. Oh my god, HBO, the missed opportunities for puns. Opportunities. No, I'm done. Anyway, I recently discovered that HBO released a docu-series on the community in which they do discuss the power of algorithms.
Congress called in the tech giants to discuss what they were doing to prevent hate from metastasizing on the internet and bleeding into the world.
While the First Amendment to the Constitution protects free speech, speech that incites imminent violence is not protected. This is a particular problem on the dark web, where we see certain websites like 8chan and a host of 24/7, 365 hate rallies.
They seemed eager to assure representatives that the situation was somehow controllable.
Of the 9 million videos that we removed in the second quarter of this year, 87% of those were first flagged by our machines.
Their new plan was to use algorithms.
That's it? 87%? Shit.
AI, which had amplified content like QAnon in order to...
So how much are you missing? So 87% of what you flagged or you got was computer generated. So if you only got half of it, you do better, bro.
Moderate and control content like QAnon.
And in episode 4, at around 47 minutes, a screenshot of Gray and I just pops up. What?
Conversely, automated moderation had intentionally or unintentionally blocked Black Lives Matter hashtags and silenced certain LGBTQ channels on YouTube.
So that's a fun surprise connection I have to the wildest conspiracy theory of the decade.
Love that for me. I think I get to crack open another beer for that one.
I mean, you cannot tell me that YouTube plays zero role in connecting marginalized creators to radicals when my face just ends up in an HBO QAnon documentary. What is my life? That is so fucking weird. So many people texted me that week and were like, are you in QAnon? And I was like, maybe. No, I'm not. No, seriously, no. HBO didn't even ask me. Don't I have to, like, I don't know, sign a release?
No. It's considered fair use.
Or something? Probably not. Though, is this gonna cause a bunch of Q followers to see my face and channel and seek me out? Hope not! Anyway, I digress. As one travels further and further down the YouTube rabbit hole, it's not just the ideology that evolves, but the delivery of messages changes as well. The tone and language employed become increasingly cruel and abusive.
And I know I made a video yesterday about why I make hateful content, but guess what? We're back with the fucking hateful content, bitches!
There's still 19
Well, that guy was kind of gay.
times more likely to commit suicide than the general population. You can.
Let's see. Long-term follow-up of transsexual persons undergoing sexual reassignment surgery cohort study. Study found substantially higher rates of overall mortality, death from cardiovascular disease and suicide attempts, and psychiatric hospitalizations in the sex reassigned transsexual individuals compared to healthy control population. Persons with transsexualism, these are pretty dated terms, after sex reassignment have considered higher risks of mortality, suicide, the general population. Our findings suggest that sex reassignment, although alleviating our findings suggest that sex assignment, although alleviating gender dysphoria, may not suffice as treatment for transsexualism and should inspire and improve. Okay, so first of all, nowhere in here does it say that. So what this says is that, all right, so just based on this information, what this is telling us is that compared to a, lack of a better term, normal, like what, cisgendered population, the trans population has higher rates of suicide, and then after surgery, like gender confirmation surgery is what it's called now, the rate of suicide is still high. Now, that doesn't actually say whether it's dropped or not. I would imagine it still goes down. It's still just higher. And there's a myriad of reasons for it. People talk about societal acceptance as one. I think so. Two, there are mental health issues that are associated with gender dysphoria. And a lot of times these are like PTSD, trauma responses, et cetera, from being, like, again, from the society's reaction. However, there's an aspect that people never really talk about, and that's the idea that as you get better treatment-wise, the suicide and temp rates can go up. And it's because some people that will look at a case of depression. When you're incredibly depressed, you don't have the energy to kill yourself, and it's a real thing. And then as you get treatment for depression, you have more energy, but it's not a light switch. It doesn't flick on and off. It's one of the dimmer switches. So you're getting better. You're going up. You're getting better. You're feeling less depressed. But guess what? You're still really depressed. You want to know what the difference is now? You're less depressed, still depressed, but you have more energy, and people tend to take their lives. So there's a myriad of different factors that would contribute to this type of situation. You'd have to observe a population or a society that was much more affirming of trans people, better treatment methods, better mental health counseling, et cetera, et cetera. But sometimes people are just going to have issues that are not going to be 100% resolved just through transitioning. You know, you're never going to, unfortunately, be able to, well, maybe you actually can. I was going to say, you're never going to be able to, get a fully functioning penis as a trans man or a fully functioning vagina as a trans woman, but we might actually move into a spot where we can put uteruses in trans women. That'd be fucking crazy. But I mean, we're not there yet, but hey, maybe in the future, I don't know.
Cannot find that kind of a demographic anywhere. But we're supposed to believe because they couldn't take a dump at their preferred bathroom at a Denny's. But that's why you find them hanging from a noose in the basement.
You see, given the erroneous claims that reactionary rhetoric usually holds, these people cannot actually contend with the ideas they challenge without relying on abuse tactics. Instead, they frequently revert to making fun of their targets' bodies.
People who are transphobic do not subscribe to trans people on YouTube. Similarly, people who are snaggletooth phobic don't subscribe to you.
Anyway, this week I changed my gender and went to Planet Fitness.
What does that mean? I'm very confused. I'm not understanding the point.
People on
Instead, they frequently revert to making fun of their targets' bodies.
People who are transphobic do not subscribe to trans people on YouTube.
Okay. I mean, they probably would just to follow them so they can see what they're doing wrong, but okay.
Similarly, people who are snaggletooth phobic.
So that sounds like a reaction to saying, like, oh, what is the point that you're trying to make here?
Don't subscribe to you.
Anyway, this week I changed my gender and went to Planet Fitness.
They mock their style and expression.
Hi, this is Ashley, your favorite trans woman.
What the fuck? Jesus Christ.
I need feminism because I get catcalled for wearing a skirt too. My friend Mars wrote, pretty sure they're confusing getting made fun of with being catcalled. I love you, Mars.
And yes, I do think that you're a fake trans. If you have to bedazzle boy on your forehead and put a rainbow cock on your cheek, pretty sure you're doing it for attention.
Well, that part may be true. I don't know that they're faking trans, but they might be doing it for attention if you put boy cock on your face. I mean, if I ever put boy cock on my face, I'm probably looking for attention. Doesn't mean I'm not trans. I mean, I'm not, but that might be an attention-seeking tactic. I don't know that person who that was, but I'm just saying.
They hurl general insults.
I commented on
like just because you're trans doesn't mean that you aren't sensationalizing that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if I liked World of Warcraft, I could sensationalize that by going around and abusing women just like Blizzard does. Sorry. I could go around dressing in cosplay all the time, being an obnoxious fuck for attention. Like, yeah, that's for attention. You can even sensationalize your own identities. You know, like conservatives do it all the time. They go around with fucking conservative flags and guns, and like they're like, "Yeah, look at me, motherfucker." You know, everybody does that shit where they lean. I don't like people who lean into their identity for like their entire personhood. Like, regardless of what it is, you know, if you're a basketball player and all you have around your room is basketball shit, you're a loser. Fuck you. You know what I'm saying? So anybody could do it, and it would be for like an attention-seeking tactic, especially if you put it on the internet. But
since stop tagging me and shit, you're annoying and act like an 11-year-old.
Most of the people who complain about this kind of thing are the worst people, the most undateable, cringy, miserable individuals. Just very tacky.
Entitled, smug, little shits.
They purposely misgender folks, and some people have even actively tried to trigger my dysphoria.
I'm sorry, that was fucked up.
They purposely misgender folks, and some people have.
I'm sorry. It gave me a laugh. I didn't realize what's happening. It looks like they put fake boobs on this person that got top surgery. This is horrible. It's actually really fucked up because they have dysphoria in their chest. So I think that they must have gotten like a top surgery to relieve that dysphoria to an extent, and then they edited it with boobies back in or something, and it's like horrible. That's really fucked up and terrible. But I'm sorry. I just chuckled for a second. It's very dark humor. It's very fucked up. It's inappropriate.
Even actively tried to trigger my dysphoria. Such a weird way to spend your free time. These channels also often like to find one unique individual or circumstance and try to paint it as representing an entire group of people. And sometimes, instead of actually critiquing the videos or people they're replying to, they just laugh at them.
Shut the fuck up. I can't right now.
Literally stop talking about what? Star Wars? Oh. Okay. Oh, Star Wars is insulting the space gender people. Yeah, that person's a fucking weirdo who made this, but like obviously that's not a representation of all trans people at all.
Shut the fuck up. I can't right now.
I'm Chewbacca gendered.
Just laughter with no actual rebuttals or criticism.
I mean, that deserves laughing at. Space gender? Ridiculous.
On top of all the ad hominems and misleading spin, these channels also consistently use fear as a primary motivator.
It's now okay for a man to hit a woman. That, in effect, is what
Hell yeah, baby! Baby, come here! Come here. Come here. Come here. It says it's okay. You think about it, maybe the buffet. Get out of here, I'm working. All right.
Mixed Martial Arts League decided when it allowed Fallon Fox, a biological male, to fight as a woman simply because he identifies as one.
Yeah, man, I'm not a big fan of like the sports thing. I don't think that. I mean, it's an unfortunate conversation. I don't like it. It's unfortunate because there's trans women who want to compete, but trans women do have an unfair advantage.
You're a bigot if you disagree. Not only are you a bigot, if you bring up your children to disagree, the left will sick the authoritarian regime on you. I mean, this is the way this is going to go over the next few years.
I think transitioning children is child abuse, right?
I can understand why people would think that. I don't think socially transitioning children is a problem. I can understand the uncomfortability of medically transitioning children. The reality is like therapy is not great still. And one of the problems is we don't talk enough in the correct way about detransitioners. I have a friend who's a detransitioner, and she, used to identify as a male. And she's like, I was misdiagnosed. I went in and there was almost an instant. I went in and said like, hey, I'm trans. I think I'm trans. And the doctor instantly gave her a diagnosis of being a trans person or gender dysphoria. And they started their transition at a younger age, and they started on hormones and whatnot. And it turned out to be a misdiagnosis. It's a real thing. And the problem is we don't talk about it in the right way. I'm not trying to talk about it in a way that invalidates trans people, but I think that it seems like there's active suppression of the concept of detransitioning in a way where it makes me hesitant about the conversation in general, if that makes sense. If we're not willing to talk about the potential negatives, then I feel like if we can't have an honest conversation, it makes me hesitant about it. So like, yeah, I'm hesitant about kids transitioning, medically transitioning. I don't think that's unreasonable. Now, do I think it's child abuse? I don't know if I think it's child abuse. I think that people are trying to do the right thing. I just think that these are young kids who haven't explored themselves enough to really possibly make the correct decision. So
the effect is that a generation of kids.
And a lot of times they'll say, like, well, detransitioning is not a problem, because if you ask trans people, older trans people, like, let's say this is one of the studies they do. They're like, oh, well, we asked a bunch of old adult trans people if they wish they would have transitioned at a young age, and all of them said yes. And like, well, that's great, but what about the people who detransitioned? What about them? Like, what's the percentage of people who were like diagnosed with gender dysphoria? And you know what I'm saying? Because we're not including detransitioners in like the argument. Do you think that we should allow kids to transition? And then there's the concept of like, what kind of transition? Because it's not just medical transitions. Some of it's the social transitioning, and there's just so many different factors. And I feel like we don't have honest conversations about it.
Kids, soon to be multiple generations, have been plunged into mass psychosis. We are not merely validating mental illness, but creating it.
Convincing viewers.
Well, what's wrong with validating mental illness? So this is one of those things, man. Is just fundamentally, like, if I don't think gender dysphoria is listed as a mental illness anymore. I think it's listed as a sexual health condition, which I tend to disagree with. I think that it has like the general markers of a mental illness. The problem is people would say, well, you have a mental illness, so you're invalid. And so that's where the transition comes from, like transitioning it from to a sexual health condition from a mental illness. Because people will, they'll be like, oh, you have a mental illness. They'll discount you as a person. That being said, I believe like ADHD is a mental illness. The idea is that you have a particular issue, and then you work as a society towards what is the solution to that issue. And the solution seems to be, transitioning in some capacity. Now, we could talk about how we would like to transition, but that doesn't make it mean that it's not the acceptable way to operate, right? And for some people that have gender dysphoria, they still identify as their born gender, born sex, whatever you say. Depending on the severity of your gender dysphoria, like, this is a real thing. So, if you have a good therapist, they'll explore all the options of like, oh, what is good for you? What'll make you feel the least like mentally stressed out?
That they are under legitimate threat from opposing ideologies. Meanwhile, the same system, the algorithm that led viewers to radicalization, also exposes them to content creators who represent the worldviews they're afraid of, and who they've learned are deserving of ridicule. Just watch Blair White's I'm Trans for Attention video? Up next, here are some folks unironically talking about their non-binary identity. Enjoy, be nice. However, because these viewers have been led to trans content only after being exposed to it through fear-mongering reactionaries, they do not end up engaging with it to understand, but instead to destroy.
Screw you non-binary snowflake. What?
Oh, it's such a broken system. In 2019, YouTube put out an official statement acknowledging issues with the algorithm and announcing that appropriate changes would be made. CEO Susan Wojcicki even felt compelled to address the potential problems with YouTube's video recommendations when they noticed that millions of hours of COVID is a hoax content was being uploaded and consumed on the platform. Although some things started to get better after the 2019 algorithm tweaks, the damage had already been done. Also, let's be real, audience aggregation is still far from perfect today. So what does this mean for trans channels? Well, we can pretty clearly
it means you guys aren't getting as much views now because they fixed the algorithm. I don't know.
See that for years, and probably still to some degree presently, algorithmically YouTube was working to bring trans creators, various groups of passionate transphobes, and fearful radicalized audiences all together. Not a good experience for the trans person in that scenario. For me, this manifested in high levels of attention from several extreme groups. But for the sake of brevity, I'll just focus on one. TERFs.
Okay. What the hell did grass do to you? I don't understand.
Quick historical context. TERF, for those unfamiliar, stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist. Radical feminism originally arose as an offshoot of second-wave feminism in the 1970s, and focused on the oppression of women in a broader social context. Radical feminists believed that personal choices and individual achievements were not enough to transform society. Instead, they desired more large-scale, radical changes in the political, economic, and social constructions built by the patriarchy. A useful analogy for understanding this might be, Rad Fem saw patriarchal society like the Titanic, with cis men in the top high-paying quarters and all other genders in the below decks. But when the boat starts to sink, we all sink together. No matter what gender, no matter what's on your ticket, no matter what room you're staying in. And we can't fix it by just bailing out our own single...
Well, on the Titanic, what happens is women and children get to go first. Men die. So, hey. That's my male privilege.
pails of water. Rather, we all have to work together to build an entirely new boat. Or we die. Sounds reasonable, right? Yeah, radical feminism can actually be really cool in a lot of ways.
No, it doesn't sound reasonable, but...
problem arose when TERFs took that general ideology, ran with it, and concluded that women are exclusively oppressed due to reproductive capability. And thus, the definition of woman should strictly be adult human female.
Well, that is probably... Well, I mean, maybe. Not exclusively, but...
It's also deviate from their political contemporaries in a few other ways, but we don't really have time for that.
I think a part of like being a TERF too is like obviously the lack of understanding of trans people, but then also the concept that like trans women will generally not understand the same struggles as cisgender women, and it's something that people need to talk about. And I'm not saying that you should exclude trans women from the feminist space, but for the most part, most trans people in general, they'll usually grow up like identifying in one capacity. Like let's say trans women, so they'll grow up as like a guy, right? And so they're socialized as a guy, and so a big part I think of female oppression comes from the way that you're raised and you're socialized away from doing particular like things. So they might tell you like, oh, you shouldn't go for a computer science degree. You should do this, blah, 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 blah. That's a big part, I think, of oppression of females and the way that they're taught to be like afraid of men in some capacities because men can hurt them, especially gross, creepy men, right? We talk about that all the time. And then you transition, when you become an adult. And so like there's a difference in the way that society interacts with women growing up versus like women after they're done growing up. And that's true across the board. And so I think that some people that aren't, like I guess you'd say some TERFs, they just don't think that a trans woman could understand the full struggle of being a woman. And I think that there's an argument there to be made that they're probably right in some capacities, but I don't think that's a reason to exclude trans women from feminist spaces, because trans women still do experience some issues of being a woman. Depending on your passability. I mean, it's an unfortunate reality, but like your passability is absolutely going to have an impact on like the way that society interacts with you and things along that line. But they'll also face issues of like being trans, right? So that's part of it too. I think it's important to bring it up because some people, like, my wife's talked to older feminists because she used to do like a lot of LGBTQ stuff and a lot of feminist stuff, and when she was in like high school and college, especially, and she would do like she did counseling kind of stuff too because she's a social worker, and so some of the conversations with the older feminists were like exclusionary of trans people, which of course she didn't agree with, but there is reasons behind it. Right, so there's something to understand.
However, what TERFs are probably most known for today is their harmful and incorrect view that trans women are not women. I wanted to take the time to explain that because I want folks to understand that not all radical feminists are TERFs, but those who are exclude trans people from their feminism by invalidating their gender identities and advocating against rights and protections for trans people. This can include making it harder for trans folks to access care, identities, and advocating against rights and protections for trans people. This can include.
Let's see, the 26th of Introduce Bill to prohibit or impede the administration of gender-affirming therapy for minors. Alabama bill introduced making a felony for medical providers to provide transition-related care to transgender minors. I mean, like, again, I don't know exactly what's going on in the bill. Like, gender-affirming care, but I understand why people are hesitant about it for kids, because, like, kids haven't fully developed yet. I'm just being honest with you. I don't know if I would go and make a bill that's about, like, blocking this, but I don't think it comes from I hate trans people as much as it comes from, like, the understanding that, it's a tough thing to talk about, but nobody wants to be oppressed. And there's a lot of like mental issues associated with being trans, and it's a very confusing thing. And if you misdiagnose, you could fuck up a kid for a long time. So I understand why people are hesitant about it.
Include making it harder for trans folks to access care or gatekeeping trans people from certain spaces, like the appropriate
no men in women's bathrooms.
Bathroom. And while TERFs mostly seem to focus their energy.
That's another conversation to have. I just want I think trans women should be able to use the women's bathroom, etc., whatever. However, there is some. This is where intersectionality comes into play. Where it's like, okay, you have a bathroom. Now, why do we have different gendered bathrooms? Mostly to make people feel safe about being in the bathroom. It's mostly women, I would say, but like, no, I don't want any girls looking at my wiggler. So you create these spaces, and let's say you have like a trans woman who's not very passable. This conflicts with the identity of being like a trans and the identity of being like a cis woman, because now you have a non-passable trans woman going in that looks like the man. They're expressing themselves more heavily as a man, not intentionally, and this is why it's unfortunate. But that can scare a lot of women. It might make them afraid. Like cisgender women might make them afraid that somebody's invading their space and making them feel like shit. And so the conversation around bathrooms, to an extent, I understand it, even if I don't agree with it. I feel like people don't want to talk about it like that because it sounds like it's going to be such a horrible, like it sounds like so invalidating, but it is like the unfortunate truth of the situation. It's something to definitely talk about.
Energy on trans women. As I, a trans masculine person, am making this video, that is obviously not always the case. TERFs are also a problem for AFAB trans people because they view us as women, refuse to acknowledge our genders, make up dehumanizing, gross, and uncomfortable excuses for why we apparently call ourselves trans, constantly infantilize us, and work to take away AFAB trans people's agencies over their own lives and bodies. Something decidedly not very feminist.
That impacts masculine-looking cis women, though? Probably not. No offense, but there's a difference between a non-passable trans woman and a more masculine cisgender woman. It's usually something that you could tell the difference between. So just letting you know that. Like, it's assigned female at birth. Okay.
What I think is most intriguing about TERFs, though, is that the majority of the feminism that they engage in mainly seems to work to discredit trans people. Like, their feminism doesn't really appear to exist unless it's at the expense or exclusion of trans folks.
Trans mom intimidating women. pressured into sex by some trans women. Okay.
Interesting, right? While I received backlash from many TERFs, I am not super into the idea of platforming a ton of their voices. So instead, this brings me to one of the few TERFs I would like to specifically discuss, Magdalene Burns. Magdalene started her YouTube channel in 2016, and she published her video about me in 2018, all well before YouTube started to fix its algorithm. The video was a response to my video titled, "I asked my corporate job if I could wear the men's uniform." That video was about exactly what it sounds like. At the time, I was a flight attendant for a major airline, and after completing top surgery, I asked if I could wear the male uniform, as that style of expression more closely aligned with my gender identity. Since I know that conversations like this can feel very scary for many trans folks to have with employers, I thought that sharing my experience could be potentially empowering or useful for anyone in a similar situation. So I sent Human Resources an email disclosing my trans identity and asking if I could wear the clothes that would make me most comfortable. If you ever need or want to send an email like this, I'll kind of share what I wrote so you could maybe use it as a rough template. Moral of the story, asking for what you want can be scary, but it can also be totally worth it, and sometimes people will surprise you by how open and chill they are. I know I'm excited for real Ash to finally show up to work. In Magdalene's response, she critiqued me for not standing up to my workplace more than I did. She asserted that the company even having different uniforms for different genders in the first place was sexist, and that was the big issue at hand. She stated that by me moving from one uniform to another rather than challenging the greater policy, my actions were complicit in that sexism. And she expressed worry for my female coworkers who might have also been struggling with the same dress code. Thoughtful points, right? Like, she's not totally wrong. I stand by my choice to vacate the uniform gender category that was triggering my dysphoria, but like, why the categories though? Do we really need them? And do they gotta be based on gender? That seems weird. Don't get me wrong, I knew that our uniforms were dated and not great. I didn't love them. I just figured if the uniforms really were that bad, then some of the women in that group of 20,000 would be speaking up. That's a bold assumption though. After all, I toughed out the female uniform for a while. I wasn't even female. Perhaps other people were doing the same thing despite feeling uncomfortable. Magdalene's video truly inspired me to think critically about all the gender dress codes that society has normalized for us. And that is exactly how radical content reels well-intended viewers in. It manipulates concerns about legitimate issues into excuses for scapegoating and villainizing marginalized groups. Magdalene's worry for my
Everybody should be naked? Yeah, maybe.
coworkers was a guise. You see, in addition to exploring the sexist nature of gender-segregated uniforms, her video also says I'm pathetic multiple times.
We get that you didn't want to rock the boat. It's fucking pathetic.
Calls me an ass kisser more than once.
Yeah, Ash, I think at this stage we've all established that you're an ass kisser. I don't think that's in doubt. Ass kisser, ass kisser.
As well as saying several other unkind things about me.
This is an activist. Fuck off.
States that my true and secret motivation for switching uniforms is to gain access to physically comfier clothing.
But why do
What?
you have to disclose a trans identity just to wear comfortable clothes? She's describing a very normal desire to want to wear comfortable clothes as if it's like some sort of kink. It's really weird. It's like, why isn't she challenging the fact that she's not allowed to wear comfortable clothes? Why does she have to get top surgery?
That argument suggests to us that there shouldn't be difference. What the implications of what that person is saying is that like men's clothes are more comfortable than women's clothes, and so like women are forced to wear uncomfortable clothing just so that they could be more appealing in some capacity. Like, oh, they got a skirt on, that's a girl. You know what I mean? Like, if anything, that's an argument as to why they shouldn't even have uniforms. I don't understand. But I think the argument this person was making is like, hey, they got top surgery, and so now they felt like they're like, okay, I got top surgery. I want to ask if I can wear boys' clothes because it would make me feel better and make me feel more valid, I guess. Okay. But then I don't know how it became a kink.
That I'm not trans, but rather I'm just a woman claiming to be trans.
You had to go and fucking set up top surgery, and you had to go through these hoops pretending that you're transgender when the entire world knows that you're not. The entire world knows that you're not.
Okay, alright.
Claims that I calculatedly took the easy way out of a sexist policy and selfishly left my female coworkers behind.
You still
That's interesting. So wait, the concept here is that this individual, Ash, developed gender dysphoria or their transness because they didn't want to wear girls' clothing. So they went through a whole bunch of affirming surgery and whatnot just to do that. I'm a little confused, bro. Do you really think that somebody would just like cut their fucking sorry being vulgar, but just cut their tits off just to wear boys' clothes? Like, I don't understand. Okay, I mean that sounds like that's okay. I feel like it's deeper than that. You know?
Work for a sexist company with a sexist policy. You haven't changed shit. That's the difference between challenging actual sexism and being a pathetic trans activist. Pathetic trans activist. When you're a pathetic trans activist, you get thanked by your employers. When you're actually challenging the status quo.
You think I'd look in the skirt? All right, I'll think about wearing one.
You don't. She hasn't even dared to show up in the suit yet. That's how pathetic she is. Throw a spine.
And finally, she strawmans the entire message of my video as well as my views on gendered clothing. This is demonstrated by the description of her video, which reads, Ash Hardell seems to think that women should have to identify as trans in order to have the right to wear comfortable clothes at work. Yes, Megs, that is exactly how I think and feel.
I'm done. I've had enough now.
Okay.
Remember the abuse tactics discussed earlier? They certainly make an appearance here, don't they?
That's how pathetic she is.
And all of this makes me wonder, why does Magdalene, acting in the interest of women, need to use my specific situation in order to point out the gender inequities in corporate uniforms? Well, maybe it's because she's not actually interested in the liberation of my coworkers, but more interested in discrediting non-binary identities and bullying a trans person off the platform. Rather than challenging the systems she claims to be upset at, maybe she views this as an opportunity to direct blame towards trans people, concern troll, and fearmonger. What she did wasn't even criticism, it was thinly veiled bigotry. But the problem is, when you disguise this kind of behavior as a progressive movement, it becomes particularly difficult to pick apart the reactionary elements from the very legitimate human ones. But clearly, there is very little substantial feminist action behind the cruelty and misinformation directed towards trans folks by people like Magdalene. Now, after getting the full picture, you might be thinking, okay, well, I'm sure folks saw through the facade and then wrote her off as a transphobe.
Well, no, probably not. There are probably people who looked at that and they were just looking for somebody to hate on trans people. There might have been people who looked at that and like actually got convinced by this argument. It's a shallow argument, but people aren't exactly the most intelligent. So yeah.
Took her seriously, right? Wrong. People like Magdalene are often positively received and have real influence. A quick look at the like-to-dislike ratio under her video reveals that a vast majority of viewers
How'd you do that? You can't see dislikes anymore.
Appreciated her message. Magdalene's work has also been viewed and publicly supported by powerful people like J.K. Rowling. In her infamous essay, Turf Wars, Rowling wrote,
Magdalene was an immensely brave young feminist and lesbian. I followed her because I wanted to contact her directly, which I succeeded in doing.
Whoa.
Magdalene was a great believer in the importance of biological sex and didn't believe lesbians should be called bigots for not dating trans women with penises.
Well, I think that last part's fair. Like, you don't have to date trans people. It's not transphobic to not be attracted to trans people, but that by itself isn't so bad, I guess. But
in fact, after I found that out, I had a panic dream that Magdalene and Rowling group DM'd me about what a disgrace I am to women. That was fun. Anyway, Meg's influence and positive reception.
Did you guys have sex, the three of you? That'd be kind of hot. You know? Pretty cool. Pretty cool.
And probably has something.
Yeah, you gotta learn to take control of your dreams. Then you could have had sex with J.K. Rowling in your dream. All right, that's your fucking fault, bro. You could have done that.
To do with the fact that deep down, she makes some good points about sexism. Some feminists may feel that by rejecting the blatant transphobia in Magdalene's video, they are also rejecting the critique of sexist oppression. That is not the case, though. It is not as simple or as mutually exclusive as that. Sexism is real and it's a problem. Also, Magdalene's video is transphobic. Both things can be true. The existence of trans people does not perpetuate sexism. Anyway, this kind of reactionary content camouflaged as a progressive movement is not uncommon, and it's much bigger than just some people making hateful YouTube videos. It can also be found in widely distributed books. Excuse the midsection set change. I decided I had to take a break and
all right. You should have done a different outfit every segment. I don't know. I guess those are probably like bandages over their scars. They might have a little bit of discomfort with it. It just like it made me. It looked. I first thought that they were just like regular band-aids, and I'm like, what is this fashion statement?
switch scenery. So I'm pulling a contra and taking a warm, steamy milk bath. Except all I have is almond milk.
Bro, almond milk is really bad for the environment. Fucking check your privilege, dude. Come on. Get some oat milk. I think it's better. Maybe it's not. Make your own milk. I don't know.
My camera falls, I'm fucked.
Take a regular bath.
I promise I'm sitting in water. You just can't see it. And check this out. Glitter nipples. Glitter scars.
Oh, okay.
Beer bath. Totally normal thing. This one's not bedazzled. This was truly a spontaneous set change break. Anyway. This is garbage. Sorry. This is Irreversible Damage, The Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters by Abigail Schreier. Yes, I spent money on it, but I had to though, because I really needed to read the whole thing if I was gonna thoroughly critique it. Also, my plans are to vandalize it and then drop lift it back at the Barnes & Noble in which I purchased it. Be gay, do crime. Not really crime though, just kind of a strange prank. Anyway, according to its own summary, this book digs deep into the trans epidemic, talking to the girls, their agonized parents, and the counselors and doctors who enable gender transition, as well as to detransitioners, girls who bitterly regret what they've done to themselves. Schreier offers urgently needed advice about how parents can protect their daughters. A generation of girls at risk for holes in their uteri. This cover art is my gender. This essential book will help you understand what the trans craze is and how you can inoculate your child against it. So I, sadly, read the whole thing, and the super TLDR is, because we live in a sexist society where it's hard to be a girl, young women are opting out of womanhood by just deciding to be trans. It also says things like, gender affirmative care is bad because being trans will almost certainly ruin your life, most people regret it. Also, influencers are trans mostly for attention and power. Also, YouTube will probably turn you trans, and being trans is the trendiest social contagion of the 21st century. Do it.
I mean, like, there's an argument to be had that there is like a level of trending when it comes to trans. It's like a real thing. Like, there was like fucking bisexual trend when I was a kid. There's two parts to it. One, let kids experiment with their gender. They'll either grow out of it or it won't really matter. Most kids that might want to like experiment with their gender, it's not a bad thing. They're just experimenting with themselves. There's nothing wrong. Kids experiment with their gender, their sexual whatever, what their music tastes are. People just experiment in general. The issue more than anything else does come where there are some therapists who are far too gender affirming and they don't actually go like operate in the correct way from like a therapy perspective. And they say that somebody, a kid might say that they're trans or express some kind of like discomfort, and they get misdiagnosed as being having gender dysphoria. That's where the issue comes in more than anything else. Like, yes, of course, socially, if it's more acceptable to be trans, you're going to see more people experiment with their sexual, or excuse me, their gender their gender in general. I don't think that's an inherently bad thing. I don't think it really matters that much. Again, it's more of the misdiagnosis that can be a problem, but that's an individual issue.
Do it now.
Irreversible Damage was published in the summer of 2020, and even though this was after I actually started to heal from all the transphobia thrown my way, this book is the perfect encapsulation of everything that fucked me up, and for that reason, it will be examined in almost every section of this series. Because it's just that bad. Now, if asked directly, my hunch is that Schreier would say she's not a TERF. Allegedly, she's not exclusionary of all trans people. After all, her book clearly states that while she's concerned about trans teens, she has no problem with trans adults. Schreier writes,
I take it for granted that teenagers are not adults. For the sake of clarity and honesty, I refer to biologically female teens caught up in this transgender craze as she and her. Transgender adults are a different matter. I refer to them by the names and pronouns they prefer, wherever I can do so without causing confusion.
I mean, like, yeah, generally I understand people are more affirming of trans adults than kids because adults usually have a better mental capacity to make decisions. So I understand why people feel that way.
Oh, thank goodness. That means when we get to the portion on me, an adult, I won't be misgendered. Good. I was kind of worried. Okay. Here we are.
Ash is in her late 20s, and she identifies as non-binary or genderqueer, meaning neither male nor female. Her pronouns are they, them. Her pronouns are they, them.
And Schreier goes on to refer to me as she for the entirety of the section. This is a clear indicator of how Schreier's proclaimed respect for trans adults is disingenuous. She acknowledges my age, she acknowledges my pronouns, and still she misgenders me. Her pronouns are they, them. What a sentence. Pulitzer Prize! For someone who holds degrees from Yale, Columbia, and Oxford, I have a hard time believing that the irony and blatant disrespect in that sentence is lost on Schreier. She knows what she's doing. Her pronouns are they, them is meant to deliberately undermine my gender and model for her readers that this kind of behavior is acceptable. And just in case you're thinking, oh well, what if she worries that they, them pronouns could be confusing for cis readers? That doesn't necessarily mean she disrespects your identity.
We watch her tell her mother for the first time that she's trans.
Then why the heavy quotations? Trans. Also,
what Ash wants to be, or thinks she is something in between.
Wants to be, thinks she is, something in between. Okay, well maybe Schreier just can't get behind non-binary identities. If I were a binary trans adult, perhaps she would respect my transness.
Because she's so chatty and adorable and looks like a very young girl, Ash manages to make trans look wholesome. I'm gonna barf in my mouth.
Manages to make trans look wholesome? That's something one must manage? Because what? It's so inherently impure? In order to hide the deviant nature of transness, one must apparently go to great, chatty, and adorable lengths. One must manage it. And I'm glad I could be that person for the trans community. You're welcome. Also, is that like a compliment or an insult? The manipulation in Schreier is strong. She's like the mean popular friend in a movie who turns out isn't really a friend. If that's not enough for you, Schreier also misgenders several binary trans adults. She calls Caitlyn Jenner Caitlyn, and she says so many other gross things, fam, and while I really want to spill them all now, I can't. I have to wait, so... Now, I don't understand how, but if you are still not convinced that Schreier's work is reminiscent of TERF sentiments, consider that the front of her book features an endorsement from Ray Blanchard. As if that's a fucking good thing.
I don't know what that is.
It's not. Blanchard is best known for his academic research on autogynephilia, which goes to his famous hypothesis that all trans women are either 1. Gay men who are too afraid to be openly gay, so they transition, or 2. Men who feel sexually aroused by the thought of becoming a woman.
Interesting.
So they transition to get their rocks off? I hope I don't have to explain why his ideas are bad. So if by this point you still believe that Abigail Schreier respects trans people, then I am resigned to say your ignorance is willful. Much like Magdalene, Schreier's concern for girls does not come without undermining my identity, coding transness as deviant, later making fun of my body, and more stuff we'll get into in the future. All
Body of an 8-year-old boy. Shit, that's fucked up.
that on top of openly acknowledging at the start of the book that she knows better and lying that she's going to do differently. You set yourself up for that one, girl. I cannot help you. You walked right into your own trap. If Schreier is truly worried about young people, why waste time with these unkind distractors? One can only conclude that this book is not about genuine concern, but rather an excuse to dunk on trans people and blame them for contributing to female oppression. Moral of the story, for many radical ideologies like TERFism, concern and intellectualism act as smoke and mirrors for bigotry. These illusions are dangerous because they can be effectively distracting and persuasive. I, for one, internalized a lot of these sentiments because, I don't know, they were like thoughtful, published bigotry? They felt harder to dismiss than chud content and troll comments on YouTube anyway. However, these
Bro, what the fuck is a chud? I don't understand. People say that word before. That's a dumb person? What does that mean? Thanks for making your videos and giving your takes on certain subjects. I learned quite a bit from them. Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. Or sister. I don't know. Sister? You know what I'm saying.
masks of progressivism are just that. masks. The truth is, trans people are not a threat to women. We would both benefit from dismantling oppressive patriarchal systems. So we are allies, not enemies of each other.
I wouldn't benefit for shit, bro. Keep it going. Keep it going, motherfucker! We gotta keep patriarchy going. Obviously. We gotta keep it going, bro. Why would I give up comfort, dude? That doesn't even make fucking sense. That's like being like, hey, you want to get off the couch and sit on the floor? No. I sit on my fucking couch, bro. Fuck you, dude. All right, I'm trailblazing. But in reverse.
Still, these were the early seedlings that would later grow into my gaslit view that I was confused, regressive, and dangerous. Theme 2, anonymity.
Do you like my Thembo shirt?
I guess.
It's cozy. My next beverage is called Fashion Mullet.
Is this like a fucking ad? I'm confused. Are these advertisements for these beers? Are you selling them? It's fine. I'm just wondering. Oh, they have a second channel. So it's going there. Okay.
Anonymity is another major player in flavoring the experience of digital harassment. This next section frequently goes hand in hand with radicalization and extremists, because anonymity makes attackers feel protected and thus empowered to speak viciously and unfiltered when addressing their targets. Speaking of unfiltered, if you are sensitive to abusive swears and slurs, I would skip to... Because the social rules of real life don't exist online, this puts
not at all, bro.
readers in front of the cruelest vitriol. Anyone can make a secret anime profile pic account on Kiwi Farms, lolcow, 4chan, Reddit, Twitter, YouTube, etc., and feel safe posting their most bigoted hot takes. Not to brag, but the Hardell Kiwi Farms recently hit 35,000 views, so...
Nice.
Ooh, that description, though. Special snowflake YouTuber, non-binary edgelord, non-dysphoric, trans, feminist.
Whoa!
And we can't forget the tags. Believes in 100 genders. Cancer. New level of autism. Ooh.
Sorry. That's so fucking mean, but that gave me a chuckle.
It's the blatant ableism for me. Also, I thought we established earlier in this video that I'm not a feminist, so... What? My lolcow thread is pretty good too, though. It's where I learned that I was punchable. So punchable. The most punchable YouTube personality I've ever seen.
In their defense, that one feels kind of true. You're a little punchable. I'm just kidding.
There are so many people I have to thank for this award. Now, it's worth noting that Anons are not restricted to textual abuse. Some have their very own video-producing YouTube channels. For instance, when anti-SJW content was all the rage, and a bunch of folks hid behind avatars, usually like anthropomorphic creatures. Back then, I was regularly...
That's a fucking weird... That shit's weird. Zoophilia. Okay.
...on the receiving end of hostility. And because I'm a masochist, here is a quick montage of some cartoons being mean to me. What the fuck? What's my life? That's so weird.
Don't get upset if I laugh.
I can't wait until I don't have to worry about this showing. It'll just be like that. Oh, that's so cool! One day.
What purpose is that for?
The fuck you think about the children?
Thank you so much for turning that down for me.
Man, girl, whatever the fuck you are.
This video is going to be a discussion with a friend interspliced with a beer and a chat.
And this video is going to be me explaining why you're wrong, interspliced with more of me explaining why you're wrong.
There are lots of ways to not be cis.
Yeah, you just have to have a huge craving for attention.
This, ladies and gentlemen, is what we call an attention whore.
You like being a special snowflake.
I don't know if anyone's ever sat you down to tell you this, but you're not a genderqueer, dogkin, non-binary carrot. You're a female.
This bitch, right? She's a person that just uses the I'm a lesbian card, you know, love me, I'm a lesbian, yeah, love me, woo, I'm unique and different. Shut up!
I haven't done a video on Ash Mardell in so long, her fucking name has changed. Seriously, she got married to a girl with ultra-low standards and so changed her name.
Oh, that's fucked up, bro.
When somebody with that much social influence goes out of their way to talk about just how dumb they think you are, it's scary.
Ooh, it's skirties. Do me a favor, grow some balls.
If you want to go over to their channel and express why you disagree with their views, that's fine, but please remain respectful and constructive.
Look, I'm not gonna take the time in every video to go, hey trolls, please don't go be assholes in this person's comment section.
Anyone can fucking make a response video to you and curse if they want to.
Well, that's all the Ashley Mardell I can take for today. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go drink bleach and blow my
Okay, so I know that 2016
Wow, incredible. Those were great.
2017 was basically like internet centuries ago. But during this era, when the anti-SJW genre was in its heyday, this was another radical group that aggressively latched onto me. It is wild how emboldened anonymity can make some people feel. I had this one illustration of a dragon who felt so passionate about criticizing me that he made 18 contemptuous
an illustration of a dragon.
Ash Hardell themed videos. They were even neatly organized in this quaint playlist for your viewing convenience. How nice. And in true Aquarius fashion, like a little robot gathering intel, I cannot help but be morbidly curious about the folks who dislike me, and so I checked things out and did some math. All of this dragon's videos about me add up to 5 hours and 54 minutes of anti-Ash content. Oh, in case you didn't know, that's a lot. That is lengthier than the longest Lord of the Rings film.
I mean, like, listen, maybe it sounds like a lot, but you know, if like I do a lot of content all the time, so I probably have a lot of hours on some content creators like Trisha Paytas. So you know, I guess I can't throw the first stone. You know what I'm saying? I'm not a talented YouTuber, you know, that makes content. I do commentary, so.
Smog obviously felt very strongly about my existence and was not afraid to speak his mind. Or at least, I thought so, until his anonymity.
Their mind? You don't know.
he was softly threatened. You see, years ago, MTV actually approached me about a new show they were producing.
Nice.
It was about introducing internet trolls to their trollees. They asked if I had any trolls, and since I always felt pretty weirded out by Charizard's extensive coverage of me, I directed MTV to his channel. I really thought he might say yes. After all, it would be a chance to explain to a much wider audience about the ways in which Ash is very bad. But because production would have required him to reveal his face, he declined. Now, I respected Spyro's refusal, but it made it clear to me that my troll derived most of his power from his mask. And quick confession before we move on. So,
I mean, you derive a lot of your power from your mask, too. That's a funny joke. Yeah, because you're trans-masculine. This is good. I'm ready to be a dad. Dad jokes coming in.
So the dragon depicted in this video is actually just a visual likeness that I commissioned. I did this and blacked out the person's name in screenshots because I'd like to give him an out if he wants. If Toothless ever decides to change and delete the hateful videos he made about me and everyone else he made videos about, I would appreciate that. He's also a smaller channel than I am. If in the future Thordak decides to move in a more loving and accepting direction, as well as exercise much better platform responsibility, then I don't want this video following Mushu around forever. Also, please, if you do happen to stumble across this person's channel, do not be unkind or cruel. Do not harass him. After all, that would
destroy them,
right? A big bad, a no-no, do not do. Anyway, beyond emboldening folks, it's also important to consider that anonymity makes it much harder to hold attackers accountable for more serious actions like hate speech, threats of violence, and doxing.
And don't even get me started on that hate speech bullshit. You've cried wolf so many times that people are just praying for that fucking wolf to show up. So why don't you take your hate speech and shove it up your ass?
Without the fear of consequences looming over them, these actions become more and more frequent. When we think about trans people specifically, we need to remember just how dangerous doxing can be. It can reveal dead names, out-closeted, or stealth people, and it can make trans folks vulnerable to violence or disownment in their real lives.
Or swatting. That's another thing, too.
While my most sensitive information has never been successfully leaked online, someone did once, with the help of their followers, discover and non-consensually share my private day job. 500,000 people learned that secret, and I was pretty worried about transphobes harassing my employer or getting me fired. I've already made a video about that, though. It's old news. So to recap, radicalization and anonymity. Online, these things work to put trans creators in front of the worst people, unafraid to say the worst things. They also expose trans people to an impressive range of stylistic abuse. As you saw, some of the transphobia I endured had real intellectual, progressive, academic vibes.
As Ash Hardell is a subscriber to queer ideology, it hasn't occurred to her to unite with other female co-workers against this sexist policy.
And some
fucking hell, look at her face! She looks like an old lady picking up cat shit!
Did not. Anyway, that was my early experience as an LGBT plus person on YouTube. A lot of mean folks saying mean stuff in 100 different mean ways. And honestly, while it didn't feel great, it was manageable. My first few years online, I maintained a pretty thick skin. I wrote TERFs and other radical groups off as ignorant, and I thought that cartoon anti-SJWs were just trollololololi. At that point, I was doing okay. I had no trauma symptoms, no tic disorder, no serious considerations of going back in the closet and socially detransitioning. So I was good. Then of course everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. I'm just kidding, but things did change when I went super viral.
Ooh. Calling my mom to tell her trans. 13 million views. Shit, you should have never told your mom you're trans. Holy moly.
I hope all of you, I don't know, enjoyed that. Stay tuned for next time when my backlash makes its way to international newspapers and television programs.
Wow. Crazy. Good shit. I guess we'll watch these credits at twice the speed. You know, we never got to see those bomb vocals. All right. Everybody's credited. We're all good. All right. Interesting video. Cool stuff. Thank you so much for watching, guys. And another special shout out to all my Patreon and Twitch subs. If you'd like to support this channel further than you already have by just watching the video alone, go down to the links below where you can sub on my Patreon, which will allow you to get your name on this beautiful black wall. Or you can go to the Twitch page and you can actually use a free Amazon Prime sub, if you have Amazon Prime, to subscribe. Thank you very much, guys. Take care.